Me? Oh, cool. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So, we do have a rest day today. In the Norway chess. So I figured I'd go ahead and go back and cover some of the Blitz games that I did not cover before. I'll see how many I can get done today. I'm gonna get at least 2, but I mean 3 or 4 might not be too bad. But for all of you guys that follow my channel, I did put a poll on my page. Something that I added recently was the little, let me see if I can get it. The little, here, the evaluation bar on the side of the board. It does kind of cramp my space just a little bit on that side. As you can see, I kind of had to shorten Shaq's name and kind of move it down a little bit. So it's not the absolute best. But if you guys really like it, I will keep it. Maybe I'll just kind of reduce the board size just a touch. I'll mess with it, but you can either leave a comment here or go ahead and go to that poll and leave a comment and vote and let me know what you guys think. So far, it looks like I'll just go ahead and keep it. It's a nice little addition. Kind of gives you an idea of, who's doing better at different points of the game. But all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking makaibigan, Masaya kong makiti kang muli. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and watching my stuff and commenting and doing everything that you do. I appreciate it very much. And anybody who is coming from Azerbaijan, I will say salam to you. Chak sagol. I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. But if you guys are ready to go, I think I've talked enough. As always, I tell people, if you ever want to skip everything I say and go straight to the analysis, that is at the very top of the description. So fear not. But anyway, if you guys are ready to go, let's roll. So we do have d4, we got d5, c4, pawn takes c4. So we do have the Queen's Gambit accepted right now. We are not going to see Wesley try to hold on to that pawn because it can really damage your position very much. So we do see knight to f3, knight comes to f6, we got e3, we got e6, and this is allowing, white to get the pawn back. Normally, unless you're playing somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing out of the opening of a Queen's Gambit accepted, you are just basically going to put yourself in a really horrible position trying to hold on to that pawn. So it's best just to let it go and get some nice developing in. So we do see pawn takes c4. We got c5, very thematic move. White has a pretty nice center established. So we're just trying to break that down. We see castles by white. We got a6. b5 is something, that definitely can come. Pretty much, kind of black's pawns are pointing in this direction. So this is where a lot of your counterplay is going to come. After you push b5, the bishop goes somewhere, and then you have bishop coming to b7, knight possibly to d7, rook swinging over, or even sometimes going a7. You have gotten your queen side developed, which can definitely be some problems when you're playing like Slav, or Catalan, or Queen's Gambit accepted type lines. So we do have b3, and we got pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. We do see bishop to e7. And then in anticipation for the pawn coming to b5, we actually see bishop to e2. But, I have to be honest with you. Just wait until b5 is played. Because, you can get some developing moves in. Maybe you can drum up some type of attack before black gets the chance to push b5. So we could have seen knight b to d2 or knight to d2. We would see probably castles, bishop coming to b2. And like I said, if you don't have to move the piece, just leave the piece there. You have d3 or you have e2. Already available if you do need to retreat. But if you're not attacked yet, why retreat? But that is not what we saw in the game. Bishop came to e2. We saw castles, bishop to b2. We see b5 now. It's the most logical move to make. You can push b6, but it's just a little bit passive. B5 kind of gets, like as much as you want out of the one move. And both of them clear, b7 for your bishop to come and get developed. So we do see knight to d2, bishop to b7. We see a4, knight comes to c6. Pawn takes b5, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, pawn takes b5. We got bishop up to f3. Very logical, just, challenging this bishop because as of now, this bishop is a really, really nice piece. So we don't really want it to be surviving. So we do see queen to d7, and queen to d7 is the novelty of the game. It's very logical. I mean, you know, you're just like, hey, man, I'm going to go ahead and protect this bishop. You know, if you trade, I'm going to take back with the queen, and I pretty much replaced the bishop with the queen, so I still have that same amount of strength rolling. So we do see h3, you know, just giving ourselves some lift for our king, and also, you know, trying to prevent anything that this knight would be trying to do in g4. We do see h6. We got queen over to b1. Rook takes a1. Queen takes a1. We see rook over to a8. You know, just trying to displace the queen a little bit. The queen comes up to b2. We see knight back to e8. Rook over to d1. We got f6. Bishop takes b7. Queen takes b7. And then we do have b4. You know, we're thinking of maybe popping a piece here and trying to get a pass pawn. Seeing if we can't drum something up. The rook comes over to c8. We do see queen to b3. King goes to f7. And then we see rook to a1, rook over to a8, rook over to c1, rook to c8, rook to a1, rook to a8. But fear not, we are not going to draw by repetition, even though it looks that way. After we see rook to c1, the rook comes back over to c8. And if we do go rook to a1 and then rook back to a8, we would be drawing by threefold repetition. But Shaq says, hey, we're not going to go ahead and do that. So we do see rook taking c8, queen taking c8. We got bishop to c5. We see bishop takes c5. And then we have a nice little cute move, queen to c3. If this pawn was back here, this would be a deadly mistake because the bishop can capture here with check. But since we do have e3 played, which is something that's very important that you want to play like in Slav, Catalan, Queen's Gambit, accepted type positions, we do not have that ability. So this bishop is pinned to this queen. So we got to try to get out of this at some point. So the queen comes up to c6. We see knight to b3. We see knight to c7. Pawn takes c5. So like I said before, you know, white has achieved their passed pawn that they desired so greatly. So we'll see if they can do something with it. We got e5. Queen goes to a5. Knight to a5 was definitely a move as well. They're all, you know, pretty much the same. But after queen came to a5, we saw king to e7. We see queen down to b4. And of course, this queen's not going to move and allow a discovered check. So don't dream. The knight comes to a6. We see queen over to g4. You know, tickling his pawn. You always want to try to find the ticklish pieces in your opponent's position, you know, because maybe you can win them. You never know. We do see king to f7. Queen goes to h5 with check. We see king up to f8. We see queen down to e2. The king comes back over to e7. We see queen to d3. Knight takes c5. We see queen to c3. So we're just literally just pinning black to death in every way ever since the bishop took on c5. It's a really tender square, it looks like. The king goes over to d7. We see queen to b4, pinning again. The queen goes down to d5. We see knight to a5. The queen comes down to d1 with check. King comes up to h2. And for those of you guys that have noticed, this is a real grind from each player. Like, as you guys can see, the eval bar has literally said triple zeros for like the past like 15 moves. But each player is just trying to like squeeze any, you know, ounce of advantage that they can from the position. And black definitely has to be careful because knight knight coming up to b7 is a very real possibility, just winning this knight. So black has to do something to defend that. And we see Wesley So go queen to a4. The knight still comes up to b7, but this does allow the king to attack the knight on c6. We see queen taking c5 with check. The king takes on b7. And then we actually see a really interesting variation flow from here. We see queen to e7 with check. The king goes to a6. We see queen taking g7. We got b4. We see queen taking f6 with check. So, I mean, even though the eval bar says like triple zeros, I mean, white's kind of like clearing all of black's pawns off the board. So we do see king over to a7. And I ask a question at this point in the game. Can we take on e5 with the queen? Or is it a blunder? If you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to work that out, go ahead and do so. Okay, so Some of you guys might be thinking, man, hey, like I'm just literally just taking all of his pawns, right? But you do have to be a little bit careful about this pawn on b4 because it is actually very close to queening. You are up a pawn in this position, though. So my question was, can you take the pawn on e5 safely? So for those of you that said you can, congratulations, you would be correct. You literally can do almost anything in this position. What we saw in the game was queen to e7 with check, but you are very capable of taking the pawn on e5. You know, you can literally push like any of these pawns. You know, you are going to be in time to save this pawn from queening. So if we do go down the queen takes e5 line, you would be seeing the pawn pushing to b3. But there are several different variations that you can go into where you're going to be perfectly fine. One of them is just pushing f4, and then after the queen would come to b4 to try to force the pawn down, we would see queen to b2, and you just completely blockaded the pawn. One of the other variations is after you push f4, maybe the queen trying to sneak down to a2 to say, hey man, like I'm about to just force his pawn through. But what you can actually do is pin the pawn. You would see queen to c5 with check, king would go over to b7, and then you would see queen to d5, and you have just pinned the pawn. So there is not a good way to force this pawn forward. And of course, if you see the queen coming up to a3, it would be a similar thing. You would just make sure that you are in time to come back to b1 to prevent that from going on. So fear not if you said queen takes e5. But for those of you out there that thought about the move and hesitated and said, hey man, maybe it's not a good thing to do it, it'll be congratulations too, because you know you are recognizing that sometimes, you know, taking pawns you know, can be very dangerous. So you played it safe. So even playing it safe in this position is definitely very fine. So like I said, we did see the king go down to a6 after we checked on e7. And then we literally just have a bunch of checks. So I will run through those. The king goes up to a7 and we see checks. And basically, you know, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov fears that this position is too strong for Wesley So with this pawn on b4. So he literally just checks him to death. And we have a draw. So, I mean, the game was like somewhat exciting. I think it would be interesting to test like both players' in-game stuff if they actually either captured on e5 and started to get this pawn rolling. But like I said, if you did, you know, not take that pawn because you were trying to play it safe, then you would be playing the same exact game that Shaq played himself because he thought that there was just too much strength in this B pawn to allow it to continue to push down the board. So playing it that way is definitely legitimate as well. So that was that game I'm taking out of round 3, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that was the round. But I appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan hanggang sa muli. And Chuck Sago for coming by and taking a look at my video. And I will see everybody next time.